Okay, so we just finished the attentional engagement and disengagement task. So we're actually going to stop acknowledge here and save the PsychoPhys recording that we just did for this particular task and then set up a new one before we get started with the video task. So we're just going to go to File, Save As, and we're going to go into a new folder that we're going to create for this particular participant. So go to Dear Study, Dear OA, SJ Practice Data, Dear OA Practice, and then we're going to create a new folder within this realm, and we're going to call this June 29th. Open up this folder, and we'll just call this June 29th DEAR raw. Click Save. Now we're going to close out of this and open up the template again before we get started with the video task. So go ahead and click Close, create Record New Experiment. We can now at this point just use a recent graph template instead of going all the way back and opening up through the graph template from disk. So just click on Use Recent Template and double click on Dear OA Template. Okay, and then from here you can go ahead and get started again. So click Start, click OK, go back and deselect the channels that you don't need, 35 through 29. Go over and right click on the scales to the right, click on Use Adaptive Scaling and apply to all channels. Click OK, and now you're ready to proceed with the video task for this protocol. And we'll come back to this momentarily when we are done with the video task and then show what we can do in terms of saving this and then segmenting out these particular trials.
Saving.
All right, so we officially completed the video portion of the Dear task. So what we can do now is we can now stop and save this particular recording for the video portion. So again, just click on Stop, go to File, Save As, and then since we already saved the attention engagement disengagement task within this folder, it'll pop right up again. And then we will just call this June 29th video raw. So now we know that the Dear is for the attention task, and then the video is for the video portion when we go in to segment and do our data cleaning. Okay, so at this point now you can detach the participant, and then once you're finished with that and you've sent the participant on their way, you can come back and work through the segmenting portion and then also the data extraction and export in Experiment Center and BCase. All right, so we're going to open up both of our acknowledge files in order to do our segmenting both for the baseline from the engagement disengagement task and the 3 videos that we need to segment from the video task. So I'm just going to go quickly. I already have the video task file open since that's the last one we saved. I'm just going to go ahead and open up the attention engagement disengagement task, and that's under Dear OA Practice, June 29th, Dear raw. Okay, so we have both of our files open right here. So we're going to start by just going to our June 29th video raw file, and we can actually start from the beginning here and go through the first instruction screen, which should be our first trigger, and then straight into the CHAMP video, which is our first video. Okay, so here's our first trigger. I'm going to click on the I-beam tool to highlight and select the portion that is at the start of the trigger. I'm going to scroll to the right. And the length of the video should be roughly 2.8 minutes, and I'll show you where you can locate that information momentarily. Okay, so here's our next trigger. I'm going to click on the Shift button on the keyboard and then left click. Okay, so it's a little bit off there. Oh, I know what happened. Okay, actually, I know what happened with this one here. So, since we had a snafu with starting the experiment center before the proper screens were being deployed to the experimenter computer and the participant computer, the first set of triggers actually don't correspond to the videos presented. This trigger right here, which we thought was the end of the first video, is actually the beginning of the actual protocol. So this is actually the beginning of the instruction screen. And then the second trigger is the end of the instruction screen, about 18 seconds, which makes sense. You look at delta t to see the distance here. So this should be the start of the chant video. So I'll highlight here, and then we'll scroll all the way down to the end. Oops, my mistake. Actually, this should be the beginning of that video. Okay. Now, another way to do this, if you're worried about any snafus that you have with your participant, you can work backwards from the end of the protocol and then get your videos that way. So you work backwards from the end, select the Wally video, then the Kaleidoscope video, followed by the chant video. But ultimately what you want to do is make sure that just the segment that you are selecting corresponds with the time scale that should correspond to the actual length of the video. All right, so I presume that this is the end of the chant video, and it is. 2.82 minutes is the length of our chant video. So delta t says 2.82. That's what we want to segment out. So in order to do this, we're going to do a different save procedure to pull this out and make this segment its own file that we can work with later. So go to File, Save Selection As, and under here what you're going to do is just call it the chant. Just call it chant video or chant vid, anything you want to, just as long as it denotes what video it is. And there are other programs that we can use to do analysis for HRV in addition to Acknowledge. So here we're going to save it under a file path that allows us to open into other stimulus or data analysis programs like this Cubios HRV program here. So what you're going to do is you're going to save it as a Windows Acknowledge 3 graph. Okay, so this is an older file path for older versions of Acknowledge that are compatible with this Cubios program. But we can still work with this file in Acknowledge 5.0 as well. Okay, so now we're going to segment out our other two videos. Okay, so this should be the end of the video and the beginning of the questionnaire, the mood rating after the chant video. And then this should be the beginning of the instruction screen for the Kaleidoscope video. And then here is the trigger for the end of the instruction screen and the beginning of the Kaleidoscope video. Okay, so make sure our I-beam is right at the beginning of the trigger. And then we're going to scroll down to the right. And our Kaleidoscope length for that video should be similar to our chant video, somewhere around 2.8 minutes. Okay, so here's the end of the Kaleidoscope video. Shift, left click, okay, about 2.857, which is, approximate to the chant video. Okay, we're going to save this selection as again. File, Save Selection As. This time we will call this the Kaleidoscope video. And then again, save this as a Windows Acknowledge 3 graph. Okay, and then lastly, we're going to save our WALL-E video. So again, this region right here is for corresponds to the questionnaire for the mood rating. And then between these two triggers corresponds to the instruction screen prior to the WALL-E video. And so this denotes the beginning of the WALL-E video right here. So again, we'll scroll down. And again, the WALL-E video should be roughly the same length as the other two, somewhere around 2.8 to 3 minutes. Okay, this should be the end of the WALL-E video. Shift on the keyboard, left click, and yeah, about 2.817 minutes. So we'll do File, Save Selection As, and this time we'll just call it WALL-E, and save as a Windows Acknowledge 3 graph. Alright, so now we've segmented all that we need to pull from the June 29th video raw file. Now what we want to do is pull out the baseline 3-minute section from the engagement disengagement file. So I'm just going to close out of the raw video. And I'm going to go scroll all the way to the beginning for the baseline. The baseline happens pretty close to the beginning of this protocol, so we're just going to scroll over to get to our first trigger point, which should correspond to the validation screen that we had affiliated with our calibration. Okay, so this should correspond to our first validation trigger right here. So I'm just going to put this I-beam here as a reference. And then this should correspond to the first trigger denoting the instruction for the baseline. Okay, actually it appears that that was the start of the baseline, which is even better. Okay, so here's our next trigger, so we shift, click, and it's exactly 3 minutes, okay, which is the length of our baseline fixation. So now we'll just go File, Save Selection As, we'll just call this baseline. And then Windows Acknowledge 3 graph, click Save. Okay, so now we have all of our files that we need to go through and do any data cleaning and then actual HRV and RSA analyses for each of those